Hello everybody, and we are live. My name's Anthony Pepperman. Welcome to the Uptown Lockdown, Duke Ellington Society UK's weekly show about principally Duke Ellington. Mike Westbrook is here, Chris Topley is here, Frank Griffith is here, as well as obviously me, I'm here. And we'll be back after we've heard Jones. Jones, played by our special guest this week, the wonderful Mike Westbrook. Frank.
Thank you. Welcome Mike Westbrook and his able-bodied constituent Christopher Topley. Mike is visiting us from the hamlet of Dawlish. Is that how you say it? Dawlish?
Yes,
Excuse my American accent. And Christopher from Southampton. And just in case you're keeping score, I'm stationed in Liverpool these days, so we have a pretty good representation of England geographically. Mike, of course, is a wonderful and very acclaimed composer, pianist, lyricist, and writer of all things musical. And today we're going to be looking at some of his music, possibly around the work of influence of Duke Ellington, if not dedicated to the memory of Duke Ellington. And just before we have him introduce the next piece and talk about it, incidentally, that was Jones, as Anthony said, which featured his band from several years ago. Just a couple of quotes about Michael's work over the years. First of which is, whether he is writing for a trio or 20-piece orchestra, Westbrook's style is unmistakable. He combines instruments in unique ways, twists conventional jazz forms into surprising new shapes, and seasons it all with delicate touches of humor and song and irony. Sorry. Everyone knows that Americans don't understand irony. Another one, this plucked out of the Rough Guide to Jazz. Everything about Westbrook is on a massive scale. The number and variety of groups he has formed, the innumerable projects, his prolific output as a composer, the broad scope and long duration of his various works. Over the years, he has developed a great mastery of orchestration and can handle everything from solo instrument to chamber group and very large ensemble. One of his greatest achievements is to have given jazz wider terms of cultural reference, relating it to poetry, theater, visual arts, and the European classical music tradition, without any way diminishing its own identity or vitality. Okay, sorry for that rather long-winded quote, but
And what do you think about it, Frank?
And just to finish up my little blurb here. Personally, I heard Mike's group in 2012, the year of the summer of the Olympics, of course, premiere his treatment of Abbey Road, the Beatles' Abbey Road, with an 8-piece band at the Canary Wharf Jazz Festival, back when they used to have live jazz festivals in the UK, in the world. And I really enjoyed that performance. And of course,
it will come again, Frank.
The other thing I wanted to mention is he has a legacy with certain British writers. One of comes to mind is a setting of William Blake's works, which of course is a distinct area of his study of the history of the UK, which comes out in his music. So, Michael, can you take the baton now and maybe talk about what you like to talk about, please? Thank you.
Okay. Well, yes.
Welcome, Mike.
Well, I'd just like to recap on the Jones piece that we played. Actually, it wasn't my band. It was the Slovenian band, a concert in Ljubljana. And a brilliant tenor sax player called Tadej Tomsic.
Beautiful.
Fantastic. I mean, usually I do work with my own band, and I'm more happy working with musicians that I know, that are friends, and I understand and they understand how I work. So going and working with a ready-made big band in another country is always a bit of a challenge. But of course, they were terrific players, and this guy in particular, wonderful. and he also did a wonderful ballad solo on a Strayhorn piece, which we might have a chance to listen to later. Something to live for. So that was that, and that was a sort of an Ellington, two Ellington tunes, or Strayhorn and Ellington. And I don't know whether people know Jones. It was on the
Sure.
Duke Ellington and the Spacemen, small group.
Oh, that's the old one.
Clark Terry, very prominent. I think Clark Terry had a hand in the tune, and it appealed to me because I was at that stage. I can't even remember what year it was, but it was a period when I was getting into a more abstract sort of way of working, and taking very simple lines and then juxtaposing different time signatures and different harmonic systems on it, and it suited me to have a tune like that to work from, which wasn't really too chromatic. It was, and so I think you may have heard as Jones went through that I started to experiment with different layers in different time scales, and so it sort of grew, and that fascinated me at the time, and well, it still does actually. So that was Jones.
Yeah, so Jones was a piece that was featured quite heavily on Duke's return tour. I believe this is right. After the Musicians' Union sorted everything out, and Duke, with his orchestra, was able to come back to the UK in 1958 for the first time since 1933.
Yeah.
And it was on that album, but it was also a piece that was in the repertoire at the time.
Yes.
And so audiences over here would have been quite familiar with it at the time.
Yeah. Well, I used bits of the original because I very much like those brass figures that come in fairly early on. But then, as I say, I sort of departed in my own way, and that's really, I suppose, the way I've approached Duke. I mean, I don't really try to recreate his arrangements. I wouldn't be able to technically. I mean, it's the ideas, it's the kind of concept, the vision, which communicates beautiful tunes and everything. And this sort of grabbed me at a very early age, and I just don't think there is any other composer in jazz with his sort of enormous range. And the thing that I love particularly and find, I suppose, too little of in the current scene is that kind of orchestral vision of music. I mean, we hear an awful lot of virtuosity playing and soloing. It's all about playing, and not enough to me about the art. The kind of broader perspective that a composer can give. And so this is what I endlessly return to Ellington to listen for. And the other thing, which has always fascinated me, is that he worked in the real world. He had to have a band to play his own music. I mean, that's something that I discovered very early on.
Yes.
Nobody's going to play your. It's very rare for anybody else to play any of my music. I've been writing it for 70 years or something now, and it's extremely unusual. I'm always extremely flattered when Chris Biscoe or somebody like that agrees to play one of my arrangements. But it's something I would like to happen more, actually. But I found that you have to form your own band, and then that involves you in the whole process of being a band leader. You have to learn about publicity, about organising gigs. You have to book the band. You have to sort of sweep up afterwards, and collect the money and all this. It's all the whole. It's back in that tradition, if you like, and back to sort of, I don't know, vaudeville or circus or popular entertainment, really. And Duke, I think he sort of never lost that, really. But within that context, of course, he played amazingly innovative music, often presented with a very flip sort of, relaxed way. We were listening the other day, Kate and I, to the Carnegie Hall concert from 1948. I'm sure everybody knows that, although it's not. I don't think it's very widely available. I got a rather obscure double album from somewhere, but it's not the greatest recording in the world technically. I think somebody must have. Well, the recording was fairly primitive in those days. I don't know how it would have been recorded. It'd be interesting to know. Perhaps one of your experts might be able to fill us in on that.
So it was, that's with Lush Life, isn't it?
Lush Life, the only time I think it was included in Ellington concert, because Billy Strayhorn was brought on and sang it with Kay Davis. Yeah, played it with Kay Davis. Yes,
so that's an important recording just for that.
Yes,
and it was in a period too.
He also premiered Tattooed Bride, I believe, on that concert, and this was in an evening of where Ray Nance played humoresque. Somebody sang Trees, there were sort of popular numbers, and then interspersed with the most amazing playing and fantastic Al Killian on the trumpet.
So, and it was
Shooting Through the Roof and all those tunes, But I mean, to put on an evening like that, and hugely entertain a packed Carnegie Hall, to me that's what I've always aspired to, I suppose, really, when I'm presenting a concert, is to cover everything, have a pop song, if it's a good one, and have some free improvisation if there are big people in the band that want to do that or can do that, whatever, and some really well orchestrated things. So I mean, I don't find that in any other band leader other than the Duke, really. I may be wrong. I mean, I haven't heard everybody, of course, but it seems to me that is so wonderful. It's so inclusive, and musicians, just responded so well to that. So I stop for a minute now.
Well, I was just thinking, 1948. It's an important recording because I think it's during one of the periods when there's one of those, recurring recording strikes stroke bans in America. So there's not a lot of other material. In fact, looking here, there's no other material. And so certainly not from studio records, because they weren't being made at that time. And of course, you bring up a point that I've always just thought is key to Ellington. I say always. For a long time, I've thought that Ellington is that fairly unusual thing, extremely popular, and also extremely artistic in an uncompromised way. So he's able to produce all of these other works, and yet still, well, I say other works, I mean, if you think of a piece like Coco, that's an extremely popular record. That sold well as a single record, So Duke managed to create work. Not only did he produce, as it were, his greatest work, as well as the popular things, much of his greatest work was popular. And that's really an extraordinary achievement in, as you say, in the business, basically show business.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're going to hear another piece now.
What should we hear next then, Mike?
Well, while we're on that track, would you like to play what I call IDMAT?
Sure.
Which stands for It Don't Mean a Thing, but it's
definitely.
This is running on from what I was talking about it. It's the same sort of period I wrote it. What happened was that the saxophone player John Hall was making an album for EMI of Ellington tunes, and he invited various people on the scene to do arrangements of Ellington tunes for him. I know Stan Tracy was one, and there were various others, and by the time I got to make my choice, all the ballads had been used up. Taken all those. So I thought, okay, I'll do It Don't Mean a Thing. Ain't got to swing, And then, of course, really got into how on earth am I going to do something original with that? And actually, I worked very hard. Again, pursuing this idea which I had of having different rhythmic schemes going on and different harmonic schemes. I found a way of extending that piece with references to the original, soloing by Pete Wyman on the soprano sax and Anthony Kerr on vibraphone.
Right.
And in fact, John made a brilliant recording of it with an all-star session band in Abbey Road Studios and everything. I thought I'd really arrived, actually. But in fact, he didn't put it on the album. I know it's for his great regret, I believe, because he really did well, but it didn't fit with the album.
Oh,
He's always referred to it as his what's it? Well, Rite of Spring. Yeah, but anyway, then of course a few years later, I had the big band again, and so we played it, and it remains perhaps the furthest I've gone in that particular direction, because it's such incredibly hard work to write those sort of arrangements, and very hard for the band to play them. So, but anyway, they were brilliant, and this version was again recorded live in a jazz festival in Crawley in, I don't know when, 93, something like that.
Right.
So here you are, Idmat.
Idmat.
Anthony Kerr on the vibraphone. How about Steve Berry on the bass? Peter Fairclap on the drums. And everybody else,
IDMAT, IDMAT.
Well,
It was a great period for the band. It's coming back to me now, because in that year I got this amazing opportunity to do a festival, all of our own music in Sicily, in Catania, with a decent budget. They raised an enormous amount of money from anti-mafia sources. This gave me an absolutely unparalleled opportunity to arrange and rehearse. We had about 14 rehearsals or something for that. We did 3 nights of different programs. And so I was able to get to grips with a composition like this because we had enough time to really rehearse it and go into in depth into it. And so we premiered it in Catania. And then a few weeks later, we did it in England. But we haven't played it very often since because, it's very difficult to find that amount of time. I think this must be something that Duke must have found as well. Although he was in that position of having a band on the payroll. And I sort of imagine that, if they had a day off at a tour, he could get them in to rehearse something. But I'm sure the usual rush, deadlines, and trying to fit in rehearsals in order to get these things together must have always been a problem, because we all have that really.
And later on, when he, at times when he was, in a location as opposed to just on the road, he would organise private recording sessions where he would try out his new work with an eye to, the future, and so we have what's sometimes referred to as the stockpile of recordings that he made. I guess probably starting in the late 40s, probably. I guess recordings that would contribute towards that collection and through the 50s. And so, yes, he was certainly always producing new music. And one of the interviews I remember he was asked, can the record companies keep up with his output? And at one point he was producing a new album every 3 or 4, 4 months or so, But he said, no, not really. He was producing so much music.
Yeah, so
can I just make a comment about the arrangement? First of all, I have to big up my pal Steve Berry, who's a neighbor of mine. Actually, he lives in Blackburn.
Of course, yeah.
And he's now got a post at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, and he's the head of jazz studies, and that is a real beacon for the place.
Yes.
But of course they're like every other higher education music program in the UK. They're all tethered to the online teaching, and that's a whole other story. But Steve is I've worked with Steve several times, and he's just a remarkable musician.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he actually told me some tales of that trip to Italy.
Did he?
Which I'll save for another show, but it's just that I just
we'll have him on.
So thank you for including some of us Northerners on the program. But really a remarkable musician and composer and everything else.
So that
go ahead, Anthony.
Alice. Yes, sorry. So that Catania festival produced its own album, though, didn't it? In a rather convoluted manner, eventually. And I was reading, I think on the website, it must have been on your website, that there were several different sources, including a DAT Walkman and some open reel tapes and so on, that came together.
Yes, that's right.
And so so there is what an amazing opportunity though to actually have a festival put on in your honour and to be invited along.
Well, it was. We had a very special relationship with the Sicilian people and the Associazione Catania Jazz, and because a few years before that, because they ran a big program of jazz things. It was nearly always American groups. They were very successful. They had a cancellation at short notice one year, and they were searching desperately for somebody to play. And they spoke to somebody who was also a friend of ours, who was a bit of a jazz sort of, major jazz figure in Italy, Filippo Bianchi. And he put our name forward. And so we went, and they had no idea what we did. And we went with the brass band, which was with Kate, Phil Minton, Italian trombone player Daniele Torrenzi, and Chris Bisco, I think, was on it. And we played, I don't know whether you know our brass band music, but it was a mixed program of Blake songs and folk tunes and jazz numbers, played a lot of improvising and quite theatrical in its approach. And we did this concert in the main square, Giardino Bellini, in the middle of Catania. It was absolutely heaving with people. And it went down so well. They wouldn't allow us to stop. We kept playing encore after encore, and then in the end we just walked off into the hill, turned round, and they were all following us. And the police had to be called in to disperse the crowd.
Pied Piper.
So after that, I mean, there was no going back. So these guys came to London and made this offer. Said, why don't we do a festival, all your music? And rather marvellously, the guy said, I realise that a lot of what the Americans were giving us was not, it was kind of routine. It wasn't really amazingly creative, actually. It changed their whole attitude. They became much more open in their programming. They weren't going for just big stars. Well, no, they were exploring more. So we had a part in that, and it was wonderful. And we did go back again and played in Catania, and we had a big project with them, which actually we went over, Kate and I went over and discussed with them. It was never even staged in the end, but we had a marvellous time discussing it, And then they came to London, and they said, what would you like to do? And I suppose they were hoping I'd say, well, come back with a trio or quartet or something like that. So, well, I'd like to do, the biggest big band I've ever had, about 25 people or something. So, of course, they were absolutely crestfallen and went away. And I thought, well, I've really blown it. And about a year later, they phoned up and said, we've got the money.
Whoa.
Okay.
So there it happened. But then, just before we went, there was the terrible assassination of the judge, very popular judge by the mafia in Palermo. And everything in Italy and Sicily was cancelled. I mean, all public things were off. And they decided they really wanted to go ahead with the festival. But it was going to be in a sort of amphitheatre outside the town, but they decided that wasn't secure enough. So they, at the last minute, switched the venue to this rooftop in the middle of the town. A beautiful place, and it was a lovely evening, and we did these 3 nights. So wonderful. That was a wonderful period, and the album, as you say, commemorates that, and that track was premiered there as well. So there's another sort of historical link with that. But I wonder if I could come a bit more up to date.
Certainly.
If you might be carrying on.
Thank you, Mike.
Because talking about Ellington as we are, for Kate and me, I think the thing which is constantly in our minds is the last time we saw the band. And I dare say you would have been at the Rainbow in 1974, was it?
3, I think.
72?
73.
73, I think.
73. And
I was a bit young at that time, I'm afraid.
were you?
I
Yes.
was. Yes, Frank. I'm not sure if Frank was there, but
I was
I mean, I don't.
in 6th form.
I mean, it was the last time they played in England.
yes, that's right.
They played in Eastbourne the night before, of all places. and then they played in the Rainbow.
I know that Eastbourne. It's a wonderful, just a fact, isn't it, that the last, as it were, official recording by Duke, not a recording session, but a concert, was in Eastbourne. Yes.
Yeah.
Although I think there's a BBC thing that they recorded a couple of days later.
Did they?
I have a feeling there might be. Oh gosh.
What
Yeah.
about the Westminster Abbey thing? Wasn't that
Yes.
Westminster Abbey? Sacred
The
concert.
third sacred concert. Yes. So that was a couple of months earlier.
Or was it? Oh.
And then they came back and performed in various locations. And yes, I don't know the Rainbow thing. Is it still there?
See, it's one of those big old 1930s cinemas.
Right.
It had all that Baroque sort of decor all over the place, Hispano sort of decor, and it would have been wonderful in its day, but it had just become a sort of rather brutalized rock venue,
Right.
and everything was painted black. So all this fine sort of stuff that would have been gold, tinsel, and so on years before was just black. So it was a strange environment, and I mean, the Ellington band you would usually see with drapes and velvet curtains and all, looking a bit sort of classy. But this was just them in a sort of really raw sort of rock scene, and it sort of didn't augur well. But I mean, the moment they played, that what I remember is just the physical force of the band.
That's amazing. There is.
Physical presence of the band.
I was going to say there is a known recording of that concert. I'm not sure. Was it just one night or one? But there is certainly a recording. I don't have that.
It was recorded a year before, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The album, the English concert, is recorded the year before. It's almost the same program. Do you know that one?
Hang on, the Eastbourne performance.
No, I don't mean that one.
No, hang on. No, sorry, you've lost me there.
Well, it's a very good album. It's just called the English concert. It was recorded, I think, where was it? Bristol and somewhere else by. I can't even remember the name of the guy. I've got the album. It's that's the nearest we've got on an album to what he played that night at the Rainbow. And, it was fantastic.
I'll have to look that one up.
And
Okay.
an awful lot of people had gone by then. I mean, there was no Sam Woodyard, there was no Hodges,
Sure.
there was no Strayhorn. Trumpets were rather weak, trumpet section. But he had 6 saxophones because Gonsalves was just sitting there, actually not playing most of the time. And but there was the thing that was the most moving. I must just go on about this a bit longer. During the second half, we hadn't heard from Gonsalves, and you could sense the sort of disappointment everybody around. You could see him sitting there, oh, please play, And they had a singer, a girl singer who sang a sort of typical blues, rather show-busy sort of blues. And in the middle of this number, Gonsalves suddenly lurched to his feet and played a chorus.
Right.
But he was nowhere near a microphone. We couldn't hear a note as he played. And then he sat down, and there was just this sort of dreadful, shocked feeling. I mean, pain in the whole auditorium. It was just palpable, And then Duke sat down and started playing Happy Reunion. And Gonsalves got up and he played, absolutely the most sublime solo, nowhere near a microphone. So we had to listen.
Wow.
It was a huge building, We had to just sort of, you daren't breathe hardly in order to hear this. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing, And I mean, within a few months, so many of these people were dead, including Duke himself, So I'm so grateful to have been there that time and heard that wonderful, wonderful music. And Harry Carney was fantastic. He played that Bluebell Africaine, and Cootie was good form. But yeah.
I was just doing some minor research. So there is an album called The English Concert, which
Concert.
pulls together pieces from 3 different concerts, apparently.
Yeah,
And
I'd be,
yeah, so sort of in 71-ish,
yeah.
something along those lines. I will have to dig that out.
I mean, he was really ill by then, wasn't he? I mean,
Well,
you wonder
73,
why on earth
yes.
why on earth was he still on the road, really? But we gathered he had no alternative, and apparently he was, am I right, incredibly in debt. He owed the taxmen huge sums.
Oh, I believe that's still an issue.
Is it?
Well, at least it has been, yes. Yes, well, he certainly wanted to complete his sacred music, the third sacred concert, didn't he? He wanted to put that
Yeah,
together and to actually perform that
yeah,
in London.
yeah.
And so, yes, so RCA recorded, well, was it RCA or BBC?
BBC originally, wasn't it? I think.
Recorded that, and then RCA also recorded the Eastbourne performance, yes.
I've only once listened to the Eastbourne. It's a bit of a sad record. Am I right? Or
Oh no! I mean, there's lots of I can't. His piano playing is fantastic, as I recall. And there's an awful lot of Duke, so I have to just have a quick. But yeah, no, I think it's certainly worth having worth having giving it a spin. Yeah.
There were some great albums, weren't there, coming out at that time on Pablo
Yes,
of the band.
A bit earlier. That's right. So
Was it slightly?
I would certainly Mercuria the Lion. That's one piece that I would definitely have a little listen to there, and also Meditation he plays as well. So featuring his piano playing, definitely something to. Yeah. So no, I don't think it's. How High the Moon they do as well. I think that's quite a remarked upon performance. So definitely worth having a listen to that. Yeah. So that was probably, as I say, I'm not totally sure about this BBC date, just from memory, but then as you say, the concert that you were at, was. So, I mean, were you able to see Ellington through the years or the decades leading up to that? On occasions.
a couple of times, yes. But yes. But
Because after they eventually, in 1958, were allowed back into the country as an
yes,
orchestra,
yeah,
and playing.
yes. I did see that. Yeah, an early band. I think a '60s, late '60s type of tour.
Yes, because they were here quite often after
Still,
that time.
yeah, there was still quite a lot going on. But what I was sort of wanted to say was that I wanted to talk about the piece that we've just recorded,
Yes.
the dedication to Duke, because that is very much sort of inspired by the memories of that evening. And to put it in context, years ago, and this is another story we might want to be interested to talk about, we did a piece called Duke's Birthday, and that was premiered in 1984. And occasionally we've returned to it over the years, latterly with an expanded band. It was originally just 11 pieces, now it's sort of up to 20. But and we had something that I'd always wanted to do. We had an opportunity to play it actually on Duke's birthday, April 29th, at Ronnie Scott's, and we were all booked this year. And of course, it was going to be a big event. I mean, the place was sold out. Everything was. We had a crack band all ready to go, and I was frantically overhauling all the arrangements. Then, of course, COVID came on the scene, and that was off. So I don't think we'll get an opportunity. We're supposed to be going back next spring, if things are going back to normal then. but whether they'll allow a huge band on the stage at Ronnie's, I can't imagine.
No.
But I don't think we'll ever be able to do it on April the 29th. Again.
Oh, dear. Well, we've got to hope, haven't we, that a good degree of normality will descend eventually. It's certainly very unfortunate that it's dragging on so long.
Something came out of this COVID situation in a very indirect way, because Kate's band, the Granite Band, which has been doing some gigs subsidised by Jazz South, which is a new organisation designed to sort of sponsor groups in the south of England. And Kate was one of the successful applicants, and we've done various concerts with her composition Granite, and we were due to play that, of course, this year as well. Those gigs were cancelled or postponed, and in a very enlightened move, Jazz South rerouted the subsidy money and offered it to the bands if they would make a recording, which Jazz South would then stream. And so that we wound up with a small budget in which to record a new piece. The only drawback was it had to be recorded remotely. Everybody recording in their own front room and then put together. So, but anyway, we did that and used the Granite Band, which by now is quite a regular unit. And I think somehow, probably by the experience of working together and the sort of rapport which has developed, I think we managed it quite successfully. And Kate wrote the lyrics, and then I basically set them to music. And the lyrics, as people will hear, are very much related to Duke, to the names of the musicians in the band, and to the emotions and the feelings of that occasion. And so I wonder if you'd just like to play a bit of that. We call it Says the Duke.
I'd love to.
Bless Paul Gonzalez, and Billy Strayhorn. Filling the air with such sweet thunder. Ivy Anderson. She got it bad. Trumpet, tap dance, fiddle, scatting, show, Raynance, Mr. Gentle and Mr. Cool, Johnny the Rabbit, and Tricky Sam.
part of Says the Duke there,
Yeah.
by Kate Westbrook and Mike Westbrook, and played by the Granite Band, named in honour of the wonderful rocks that there are around in the West Country, especially perhaps on Dartmoor.
It's-
Worth pointing out, Anthony, that it's only a short excerpt of the track, and it's about 19 minutes long.
As I was just thinking, and when we were speaking earlier the other day, one LP side. So you've got to come up with a second side now.
it was a problem because the thing is, with a lot of Kate's lyrics, I mean, as you probably know, we've been working together for, I don't know how long, 40, 50 years or something, mostly writing settings of words, which Kate usually writes her original lyrics, occasionally arranges poetry from some other source in different languages and so on. But this is sort of thing has taken me into Granite, and this taken me in some new directions. And the other recent album, Earth Felt the Wound.
Yes, I was going to mention that. Yes, just
because letting the flow of the lyrics determine the shape of the music. So we're no longer thinking of AABA, 12 bars or 16 bars or 4/8 or whatever. Just let it go. And this happened with this one because somehow the way the words fell gradually came, dictated to me the way I wanted to set them. And I wound up, actually a chorus is about 88 bars long, if it means anything. I mean, it isn't a chorus at all.
That's longer than.
Well, don't lose count, for goodness sake.
Yeah. So in other words, it's quite a challenge. And of course, if I wanted to have, in fact, 4 choruses, that's how it crept up to that length. And it's a great challenge. I mean, when you get a chance to listen to it, you'll hear the soloing by Roz Harding on the alto and Jesse Mollis on guitar, coping with this very long structure, which I think they do absolutely brilliantly, but it's very unusual. And I think this is an interesting way that I'm sort of going. You're getting, which is all we want. We just want to be free. And I just think I'm getting freer of the conventional structures of things.
Sure.
So much so that it doesn't really matter. You don't have to think, what is a chorus, do you? You have just, it's just there. So I'd like to be able to pursue that more.
Well, it's more like the structure.
This is an example of that.
It's more like the structure of, as Frank mentioned at the start there, or if there is a structure so much of, much of so-called classical music, isn't it? It's not actually necessarily based on that sort of thing.
I wanted to just jump in and ask Mike about his larger group that was, it's called the Uncommon Orchestra.
Yeah.
Which of course was due to play at Ronnie's on Duke's birthday. I noticed that you've got an extraordinary group of musicians from all over, or large part of different parts of the UK. It's not just the London musicians that you presumably worked with.
It's hardly any London musicians, actually.
Well, there's a handful.
Yeah.
There's a handful. There's Pete Wyman, our good friend.
Yeah, he's London.
And of course, as a guest, Chris Biscoe and Stuart Brooks.
Yeah.
Many of the people listening and watching might not know these names, but Dave Holdsworth is another notable name.
He lives in the southwest now. You see, he retired.
Yeah. But he also
Lots of people do.
Yeah, a great double, trumpet and sousaphone. That's incredible.
Yeah, marvelous.
What a joy to play the highest note and the lowest note.
Yeah.
But I wanted to point out that you've got, of course, Kate Westbrook singing, which would love to hear some of her work. Maybe today or a subsequent show. Of course, her rendition of "Lush Life" is brilliant. I wanted to say. Just a very unique, haunting version in my estimations.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to point out some of these names I won't be able to pronounce Dominique
Pifarelli.
Forelli.
Pifarelli.
Frank's got a complete personnel list of the Uncommon Orchestra.
No. I
there.
just want to point out that in addition to the 20-piece big band, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
you have Dominic, you have Stuart Brooks, a wonderful trumpet lead player,
Yeah.
trumpet, also a great jazz soloist, and Chris Bisco, who plays every saxophone known to man, and unusually, a cellist, Frank
Yeah.
Schaefer. Can you tell us a little bit about how those guests came along to join the bigger band, and with those slightly, well, two string players,
Yeah.
which of course, you know, I mean, obviously you had Ray Nance with Ellington, didn't you? But
Yes.
I don't know that Ellington ever had a cellist, and I'm not saying he should have or that you should have, but I'd like to know what your orchestrational view was on that.
Yes. It's the way it's been a sort of organic process, the evolution of the lineup of bands over the years. There's always been a kind of nucleus of people at any one time, and some of them, I mean, Chris Bisco, Kate and I have been working with since 1980 or something like that. You know?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And we still do whenever we can. Pete Wyman is another long friend. There's often historical sort of reasons why we got together originally, and sometimes some people have sort of stuck somehow. We've stayed in the same circle. Other people come and gone, moved on, given up, or whatever. At the time, we did. This gets so complicated because there have been so many different projects. But in 1983, we did a composition, or I did, for the Benjamin Britten Foundation. It was a young person's guide to the jazz orchestra, it was supposed to be. And in fact, it grew from that into a major work, which I called After Smith's Hotel. I won't waste your time trying to explain all that.
The long story.
For that, I had
We'll have you back.
for that I assembled a big band of fairly conventional lineup, but we did include cello, yes, because at that time, we were working with a cellist called Georgie Bourne, who we'd met originally when we collaborated with Henry Cow, which is a rock band. But we toured with them, and she was. I for the first time wrote things for the cello, which I absolutely loved. The Bach cello suites are about one of my favourite bits of music ever. So, I mean, Kate gave me early on a revelation, that kind of, and I've loved the cello ever since. So she was part of this big band, and in that composition, After Smith's Hotel, was one movement which was called On Duke's Birthday. And this was because while I was working on the piece, we had a chance to go to New York to play. Only time I've ever been there, actually. It's some sort of festival. We went over there with the brass band and played our Blake material. But we happened to be there on the 29th of April. And lo and behold, there were 2 radio stations in New York that played non-stop Ellington all day.
No way.
Wherever you went, there was Ellington everywhere. And as it happened, again, bit of luck. We'd been to see Gil Evans and his band the evening before, and arranged to go round for tea with Gil.
Oh.
So that was a lovely experience. We had a walk in Central Park and sort of chewed things over a bit and so on. It was a wonderful occasion, and I came back very much fired up with the idea of something to celebrate that day, basically. And so that's where On Duke's Birthday came from. Well, then, lo and behold, the following year, 1984, was the 10th anniversary of Duke's death.
Yeah.
And there were two festivals in France, at Amiens and Angoulême, who jointly commissioned a piece to mark that occasion. But they couldn't afford a sort of 20-piece band. They sort of said, so I never mind cutting down, actually. I think it's quite interesting. So what I did was sort of boil it down and use some of the musicians that we'd worked with in other contexts. That's where Danilo, the trombonist, came in. Dominique, violinist, we'd met and worked with. Brian Godding, the guitar player that we worked with. Kate, Phil, of course, and Tony Marsh on drums. I think it was an 11-piece band. We rehearsed, went to Amiens, and the first performance, the premiere, was recorded. And that's what we made the album from. I mean, it was just absolutely wonderful that it was the very moment that this music was played for the first time is the album.
Yeah, I think.
Then every now and then we've gone back, but of course ever since then, Dominique has always been part of the lineup because he made such a strong connection with it. And there's always been a cello. In fact, Georgie eventually gave up, and so we've had a succession of cello players. Frank is the latest. So, people come, and I mean, we'd have a huge band if we could have all
everybody together.
But as it is, it's spread out between different lineups.
Yeah.
There's a community of probably about 50 musicians who are kind of in the band in a way. But on any occasion, it may be 8 people or 10 or very occasionally 20.
Well, I think one of the upshots of this is that even though, I don't know, you've explained it very well of how this has come to pass over the years, but it's a very Ellingtonian thing as well, because Ellington wrote for the individuals in the band, and you could tell by listening to an Ellington saxophone section who was playing each part, not because of the note they played, the saxophone, but their unique voice on that horn. You could always tell the difference between Paul Gonsalves and Jimmy Hamilton. You could always tell the difference between Johnny Hodges and Russell Procope because they had distinct sounds. And of course, Harry Carney is unmistakable throughout.
He is. Yeah.
He had such a strong voice on the upper range of the baritone. As you know, the baritone sax assumes a whole different sound when they play in their top 4 or 5 notes at the the palm key. And as a arranger, of course, you know that the saxophone can sound distinctly different in each of the 3 or 4 registers. You can spot a player. And with Ellington, you can always spot the fact that he and Strayhorn did not voice conventionally for the saxophones. The same way, I hope Bob Hunt's not listening. The way he wrote for the trumpets and the trombones and their different mute combinations.
Yes, indeed.
And Cootie had a plunger sound, and of course, other players would have had a more of a distinct sound on the cup mute or the Harmon mute, which is the real high pitched, that's kind of piercing sound. But I noted that because you have these unique players guesting with the band that we mentioned, 2 of which are string players. And I just really look forward to hopefully Duke's, whatever it'll be, 120th birthday or whatever. 121st, right, Anthony?
Yeah.
In the coming year, COVID happily providing. Interestingly, that we're having this show on the 2nd of December, and for those of you not in the UK, is the slight lift down of the lockdown. although apparently 99% of the UK is either on tier 2 or tier 3.
Yeah.
Well, whatever you do, don't go out and celebrate and spread the disease.
Just spend time with us online where it's perfectly safe.
Yes, follow us on our YouTube channel where all the past episodes are, and you can spend the rest of the time till Christmas there, I think.
And finally, as we are having to create music online, as Mike described, the Says the Duke track, it was a remarkable recreation of what you intended to do, even though it was done by individual telephone emailing parts to a central station.
Yeah.
Shall we hear at least part of that premiere performance and famous recording on Duke's birthday?
Okay.
So here's the beginning of the piece called On Duke's Birthday 2. On Duke's birthday too.
We're going to listen to...
Oh, Frank.
Sorry.
We're turning our attentions now to Billy Strayhorn.
We're going to introduce Billy with my short version of one of his longest songs called Lush Life.
Thank you.
That was most
Lovely.
of Lush Life.
Jazz and cocktails, I know, but I mean, after Brexit, will we be able to afford both? And the answer is, of course, no. Jazz is very, very rarely affordable. But anyway, the cocktails, I don't know. People are probably finding solace at a certain extent in that, as we indeed get into this colder period here, as winter indeed has arrived. Lush Life there, a piece that Billy Strayhorn allegedly, apparently, wrote when he was a teenager, and which he had already prepared when he joined the Ellington organisation in '39.
Yeah, wonderful song. Do you know a series of CDs made by, is it Tony Scott?
Yeah, I'm a fan
player?
of Tony. Yeah.
I think it was 3 albums, all devoted to Lush Life.
Really?
We've got them. Somebody gave. There was a German company, I think, made them, and played on different instruments. Sometimes just speaks the lyrics, and at one point there's a version of Strayhorn playing it at a party or something like that on a piano, and very much quicker than most of us ever do that song. He's rather like a sort of Noel Coward type, song. I mean, you put it in that sort of context of a sort of theatre song, but these amazing lyrics, and you just wonder how, and with Something to Live For, which was the same sort of period, how a young guy got so much. Although the biography of Strayhorn does enlighten us a bit about that, which you probably know, the Lush Life biography.
Well, related to that,
He
yeah.
he invited himself backstage to Ellington when after a concert, and demonstrated his what a nerve, demonstrated his tunes in the dressing room, and
He was.
the rest is history,
He
But
had
Duke never really featured Lush Life. I think he didn't like a song about alcoholism. I think he was a bit, sort of not comfortable about that with his public. Am I being wrong? I don't know.
It's possible.
It seems very odd that the only occasion we know is that 48 Carnegie Hall concert.
So it's a piece which they very largely, but not quite, kept private, as it were, and it was certainly performed in private.
But I
And
mean,
there is that recording of Billy Strayhorn, as you say.
I think it's a terrific test to people, that song, isn't it? I mean, verbally, vocal wise and instrumentally, because the verse, of course, as we know, is incredibly long and complex compared to the way verses usually are. They're usually just a sort of, an intro to the main thing, whereas here the verse is almost the main thing. And also there is a sort of profundity about the
Indeed.
lyrics and the life experience that goes into that I just don't. I think you have to reach a certain age before you even qualify to sing that song or play it.
It's always interesting because of its almost legendary status in that way. If you're interested in hearing what a singer, jazz singer, another singer perhaps, the type of singer, is like, you want to hear their Lush Life. Have they recorded Lush Life?
Yes,
and if they haven't, then you don't necessarily know as much as you might do about them. And so when you do, as a singer, it's a bit of hard work. It's like playing, say, lots of pieces, but the Chopin Funeral March as a pianist. It's it's such a definitive, such a piece of music, it's such a piece in the repertoire. You will be known by your treatment of it, and so I think some people do shy away from that.
Getting back to Tony Scott, I'm glad you brought him up. He is quite an intense guy. He's no longer with us, but he was a very forceful, over the top kind of personality, and his clarinet playing embodies that. But having said that, he was one of the first jazzers of the 50s to hire Bill Evans, and Evans and he were close musical partners for
interesting,
2 years. So that says a lot about him.
Yes, very interesting.
And speaking of Strayhorn and Ellington, Ben Webster made a double album on Verve with strings, arranged by Ralph Burns, who we associate more with, Woody Herman and stuff.
Yeah.
But Tony Scott plays clarinet on it.
Yeah.
And it was before he kind of went ballistic,
Yeah.
And he was just had the sweetest, most supportive accompaniment. And as you know, being a writer, the sound of the tenor and the clarinet are very compatible because they're literally an octave away from each other. And they're both woodwinds, obviously.
yeah.
And I just, that was my introduction to Tony Scott. I bought that LP, 40.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it's the same Tony Scott who used to like to misbehave in public with a clarinet in his mouth. So let's give a positive vibe to Tony Scott.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I know. Yeah, indeed. Can I just? Well, I think I would like us to play our trio version from Catania of Lush Life. That's got Chris, because our trio with Chris Biscoe, Kate, and me has been something that's run through our lives for so long, and we've been through so many different experiences together in so many different places, and there is a tremendous empathy. I don't know. I mean, it's just it's just there, and in a way, it's summed up by Lush Life, because it's a tune we came to, I suppose, later in life, really, or later in our careers. And anyway, you'll hear a version with Chris improvising an introduction, and then we've actually got the cello, which is Frank Schaefer. So he does get a little appearance anyway this afternoon. Then you'll hear Kate's vocal. Anyway, should we hear that one now?
Let's do that.
used to visit all those very gay places, those come what may places, where one relaxes on the axis of the wheel of life to get the feel of life from jazz and cocktails. The girls I knew had sad and sullen grey faces with distingué traces that used to be there. You could see where they'd been washed away by too many through the day. 12 o'clock tales. Then you came along with your siren song to tempt me to madness. I thought for a while that your poignant smile was tinged with the sadness of a great love for me. Ah, yes, I was wrong. Again, I was wrong. Life is lonely again, and only last year everything seemed so sure. Now life is awful again. A trough full of hearts would only be a bore. A week in Paris might ease the bite of it. All I care is to smile in spite of it. I'll forget you, I will, while yet you are still burning inside my brain. Romance is mush, stifling those who strive. I'll live a lush life in some small dive, and there I'll be till I rot with the rest of those whose lives are lonely too.
Lush Life, Kate Westbrook, Mike Westbrook, and Chris Biscoe. And tell me, sorry, who was it? Just remind me the name of the cellist there.
Frank Schaeffer, yeah.
Frank Schaeffer, cello.
This was the
Chris Biscoe.
concert in Catania, so you just have to picture a sort of stage with a lovely starry sky above us.
Oh, amazing.
Lovely warm crowd. It was a beautiful night, and just special, very special. But talking about Strayhorn, I got more and more interested in his writing later years, I suppose, probably as I've grown a bit older and wiser, hopefully. And I just thought you might be interested to hear something I was doing just as a piano piece based on his tune Johnny Come Lately, which is something that's always fascinated me ever since I heard the Cecil Taylor version of it, which you might know with Steve Lacy. And I've also, of course, listened to the Ellington version of it. And there's something about that tune. I don't know whether Frank would agree, but I think there's something about that descending octave which
Oh,
strikes me as very unusual. There's plenty of octaves going up, but I can't, I could think of very few. I could think of Willow Week for me, I think of a couple of, and I think a descending octave, and there's something very, very, quite sort of strong about that, and it seemed to me to indicate something futuristic almost. And this is what lies behind this particular interpretation, which I've approached it very freely, as you'll hear, but rather fascinated by a direction that I think this music can take. You know, do you want
well, this is
to say
a
that?
particularly stunning example of Billy's slightly earlier work with Ellington. I think it was recorded, or at least written in the early 1940s.
Was it? Yeah.
And as you say, it's unusual to start an octave going down.
Yeah. It is.
Another good example of that is Daydream, which goes up an octave.
Yeah.
You know. But that sounds a bit more, I don't know, natural or conventional. So
Yeah.
all the best to Billy for doing
About that,
that.
yeah, which I found fascinating. But
And
do
then,
it's
if that's not enough, he's got these really unusual intervals. Bida, boo dee bee do bida, boo dee dee da. He's got a lot of half.
but it's like a tone row, isn't it?
It's
The
got,
tune is like is a bit like a sort of tone row. It's something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just
know.
on an interesting. Well, for me at least, I did a concert at Cadogan Hall in London 5 years ago, which would have been Billy's 100th year centenary.
Yeah.
And as you know, he had his birthday about a week ago, a few days ago,
Did
actually.
it? Yes.
And the guy that organized the concert is a pianist and composer, and he wrote words to Johnny Come Lately,
Yeah.
which aren't easy melodies to write words to. But he asked me to orchestrate the chart, you know, the arrangement for my nonet. Actually, it was a nonet plus violin, so it was a tentet, but it was six
Yeah.
chords and a violin.
A tenet.
It featured heavily, you know, because it's such a stringy melody. Because violins, as you know, can play anything. String players can play anything. You know,
Yes, I know.
they love a challenge, don't they? You know,
Yeah.
if you listen to Bartok's string quartets, you'll see what I mean.
You
And
know, a challenge.
I had a joy of a time writing it out for Nonet because the harmony is just so
Yeah.
brilliant. It's kind of descending chords, isn't it? You know. Anyway, that was a feature, a nice feature to write. And
Yeah.
as I say, a number of Billy Strayhorn tunes have been recently lyricized in the last 10 years. One of which is another classic from, and his mother called him Bill,
Yes.
Belknap, called Blood Count.
Yes, I
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Particularly haunting song
Yeah.
and harmonically very, very rich.
Yes, it is. And
But not a particularly happy song.
No.
no, certainly not.
Stan Getz
From his deathbed.
at the end of his
Yeah,
life.
he was dying. Yeah.
And
Let's hear this Johnny anyway while we're talking about it.
Johnny Come Lately. Here we go.
We just hear a bit of it. It's just an extract from a
sorry,
song.
go ahead, yeah.
Definitely. An excerpt there from Johnny Come Lately, played by a very special guest this week, the wonderful Mike Westbrook.
Yes, anyway, well, there's so much one could say about Strayhorn and about Duke, but anyway, thanks very much for inviting me to talk.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure to have you. Thanks again, and thanks to Chris as well for being here. From his palatial surroundings there, literally. And,
Just a tiny flat, you know.
well, some of us are pressed up against a pine wall here, and some of us are. Well, I wonder what the background really is there. But anyway, okay. And of course,
Drab.
and of course, Frank is up there in wonderful Liverpool, economic capital of England in the past, and suffering at the moment, and hopefully going to make something of a rebound. And I hope that we all will as well, actually, as this particularly strange year draws to a close.
I was just thinking, why don't we next April 29th start now campaigning for Radio 3 to do a Duke Ellington Day?
Yes, they should, shouldn't they?
I think
even a week. Composer of the week.
So
I know they've done that before, haven't they?
They have done that. What they have not done is what they've done for certain other composers, which is to dedicate pretty much the whole week or so to playing everything that they did.
Yeah.
That would be quite a quite an effort, but yes, possible. Or maybe we should just do it. I mean, the BBC is fine, but on the other hand, we have our little show as well. Yeah.
But there is a lot of people, I don't think a lot of music students are aware of Duke so much now. I think it's beginning to, there's a danger of disappearing, that kind of, as I say, I think it's so much about virtuosity and individual, it's become very different thing. And
that's Louis Armstrong for you, isn't it? Breaking out of the King Oliver band there.
There's the way of, but the Duke showed that there is a way of doing everything. That's the wonderful thing about him. You could do everything. You could play Hello Dolly, as he did at the Rainbow, and I suppose a lot of us groaned, about Quentin, but we thought we just need to do this, Louis Armstrong impersonation. But of course, he enjoyed doing them all, and he liked having some fun with it all. And then he'd say, "Okay, now listen to this." And that's, I think that's so much the way it ought to be. Jazz should be back in the centre of things.
I think that, I don't know about the centre of life in general, but in education, certainly a couple of things that I'd note. I mean, there are three things, I guess. Firstly, let's just mention with Martin Hathaway and the Guildhall School of Music, the Society and me, and Michael Kilpatrick from somewhere in East Anglia, have been producing, and also very much used, I should mention Tony Faulkner's music as well in this project.
Yes.
An ongoing project with the school to put together a concert of music with the students at the Guildhall School in London every year, up to this year, in the last sort of 10 or 12, 13, 14 years, or however long it's been. And hopefully we'll be able to do that next year, I guess, or at least as soon as possible. We will be hopefully being able to do that. And I say this to anyone who will listen. There is an enthusiasm for the music amongst those young people. They're not super young. They are adults, but the young people there in that.
I know
in that school of music particularly.
I'm thinking of the public in general and the media in general. There's not as much of it, let's face it, on the radio as there used to be.
No, there certainly isn't. But on the other hand, there are many more avenues for people to find things.
Can I just give a quick plug to a wonderful saxophonist who's also a Devonian or whatever, called Ian Wellens, who not only plays with Mike Westbrook's bands, but also has an Ellington ensemble of his own, or did.
He did, yeah.
He did,
and
yeah.
he performed and presented at one
Very
of the
nice,
conferences. I believe it was 2008.
Probably, yeah.
That sounds right.
Square in London.
Well, somewhere near there, yes.
And it was a hotel there, or whatever. Anyway, Ian came along, and I remember meeting him and talking to him, and then I was surprised, but not surprised to see that he was booked to play with you at Ronnie Scott's. And
Yes, he's part of the band. Yeah,
thank you for
So wonderful. Yeah. And,
name
in our
because
Discord chat, Quentin has mentioned that he too was at the Rainbow concert in 1973 there.
yeah.
Gosh.
I may hear from more people like that. It'd be interesting to hear people's
Well,
memories.
so there were a few people that we knew who were at the thing a couple of months earlier, the Third Sacred concert.
Yeah.
There's two or three. I won't mention them now, but there, there's two or three people that have,
Yes.
come to one's notice as having actually attended that.
I will
performance.
contact Ian
Yeah.
and ask him to join us on one of these shows if he's
Yeah.
to, because I liked his band he had. I don't remember, it might have been like a 10-piece band or slightly
Yes, it was. Yeah.
conventional.
Three horns of their rhythms, actually. Yeah.
But it was just wonderful, and I thought, this is great. Just a chap who lives presumably around Exeter, maybe, I'm not sure where.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
And
He had to give it up in the end. I don't know quite why. It's
So
difficult to keep
I'm
the
not
band
sure. I
together.
can't remember if any examples from that particular concert are on our souvenir CD. From the, but yes, I do remember. You're on that CD, Frank, of course. Is he is he there, Ian?
no, but he was there. He was there in attendance. Yeah, but I just remember there was a number of British-based Ellington ensembles, and I don't remember the name of his. It might have had the word Harlem in it. I'm pretty sure it had the name Harlem in it. Anyway, so good on Ian. Good on him.
Yeah.
Very good with cheese as well.
Oh,
And what he is a major importer or seller of cheese.
Oh,
Well,
is he? Oh dear. Oh well,
yeah.
never mind. At least he's also an Ellingtonian musician, so that's
No, but
Spring-
nobody's perfect.
table.
it's amazing cheese.
Well, see, that he's a shoe-in.
So okay, righty ho, Mike. As I say, thanks so very much for being here these last two and a bit hours, and
Yeah.
2 hours.
Quickly, I appreciate it very
and,
much.
and what are we going to finish with then?
Well, why not a bit more stray horn? We got this big band of Slovenia again. Perhaps nice to end with a big sound. It's a number we've played a lot actually with our own band. I don't yet have a recording of. Alan Wakeman plays it with us with our band, and but we haven't yet managed to put it on an album yet. I hope we will. But anyway, this is the Tadej Tomsic, Slovenian guy, playing Something to Live For.
Thank you.